The sky above the mountain had been a clean, honest blue all morning. That was the first lie it told them. Mara Voss noticed the change before anyone else did. She noticed most things before anyone else did, not because she was smarter, not because she was more experienced, but because she listened. Truly listened. The way most people never learn to. The low hum of the wind had shifted a quarter turn, from west to northwest. The birds had gone quiet in a very specific way, not the lazy quiet of midday rest, but the sharp, sudden silence of creatures that knew something was coming. She mentioned it once, quietly, to the person walking closest to her. That person was Travis. He glanced sideways at her, the way people glance at someone they have already decided not to take seriously, and said, "We're fine. We're almost at the turn." Mara said nothing more. She kept walking. There were 7 of them on the trail that day. Derek Osei had organized the trip, a 2-day route through the Cascade Ridgeline, finishing at a campsite with a view that Derek had described, enthusiastically and repeatedly, as life-changing. Derek was the kind of person who planned things well and felt deeply responsible for everyone in his orbit. He had invited Mara as a personal favor. She had broken her ankle badly 9 months earlier during a solo trail run, and this trip, Derek had decided, would be good for her recovery. Good for her confidence. Good for getting her out of her apartment and back into the world. The rest of the group, Travis, Chloe, Penn, Simone, and Luke, had accepted Mara the way people accept a responsibility they didn't sign up for, politely, at the beginning, and with growing resentment as time went on. Mara was slower than the others. Her ankle had healed, but not completely. On flat ground, you would never have known. On a rocky uphill trail with a loaded pack, every 3rd or 4th step carried a small betrayal of pain that she had learned to hide in her face but could not hide in her pace. They had waited for her twice. The first time, no one said anything. The second time, Travis had looked at his watch in a way that was louder than any words. The storm arrived the way all truly dangerous things arrive, faster than the mind is ready for, and from exactly the direction no one was watching. One moment the ridge was windswept but clear, the kind of cold that feels bracing and alive. The next moment the temperature dropped 8 degrees in less than 4 minutes. Mara knew because she felt it the way she felt everything on this mountain, with a sensitivity that she had spent most of her life wishing she could turn off. The sleet came sideways. Within 60 seconds, visibility had dropped to roughly 20 meters. The trail markers, the small orange blazes painted on the trees, vanished into the white. Derek shouted something. The wind took most of it, but the word "move" came through. They were moving. All of them. Heads down, packs hunched, bodies leaning into the force of the weather like people walking against a wall that kept pushing back. Mara was at the back. She was always at the back. The route was under 2 inches of fresh snow, invisible, patient. Her left boot caught it at the exact wrong angle, the angle that her physical therapist had warned her about, the one that put direct lateral force on the joint that had not yet finished rebuilding itself. She felt the ankle twist before she heard the sound. She heard the sound before she felt the pain. And then the pain arrived, honest and absolute, and she went down hard onto the trail. She did not cry out. She had learned a long time ago that crying out in certain company only made people uncomfortable, and discomfort made them unkind. She pressed her hands into the snow and pushed herself upright. The ankle held her weight, barely. She took 2 steps and called ahead into the storm. "I need to slow down. My ankle." Travis turned first. He looked at her, really looked at her, the kind of look that calculates, and then he looked at the sky, and then back at the trail ahead. "We can't stop," he said. "The temperature is still dropping. If we stop here we're in trouble." "I'm not asking to stop," Mara said. "I'm asking to slow down. We are already going slowly." Derek stepped between them. He looked at Mara's ankle, then at the sky, then at the trail. He was doing the same calculation Travis had done, but with more guilt written across his face. "How bad is it?" he asked. "I can walk," she said, which was true. "I will be slow," she said, which was also true. There was a silence between the 7 of them that lasted only a few seconds but felt much longer. The wind filled it. The cold filled it. Travis filled it by taking 1 step forward and then another, and then he was simply walking, and one by one the others followed, because motion felt like safety and standing still felt like danger, and Mara was neither of those things. She was just a problem that the storm had made impossible to solve. Derek was the last to leave. He unclipped the emergency whistle from his pack and hung it around her neck. He held her eyes for a moment. There was genuine sorrow there, she could see it clearly. Sorrow, and helplessness, and the particular shame of a person who is choosing the easier thing and knows it. "Follow the trail markers," he said. "They go all the way down. We'll send help from the base camp as soon as we get signal." "I know," she said. He nodded once. Then he turned and walked away into the white, and she was alone. Mara stood on the trail for exactly 30 seconds. She counted them, one of the small disciplines she had developed over years of managing the condition that had made her childhood so difficult and her adult life so quietly exhausting. She had hyperacute hearing. That was what the doctors called it. What it meant, practically, was that her ears processed sound the way a high-powered microphone processes sound, with far more sensitivity than was comfortable, and far less ability to filter. A crowded restaurant felt like standing inside a machine. A city street was a constant assault. Even music, which she loved, had to be listened to at low volumes, in quiet rooms, alone, or it became painful rather than beautiful. On a mountain, in a storm, with all 7 of her companions gone. The world was loud, but it was a manageable loud. Wind. Ice crystals against rock. The deep structural creaking of old trees under new weight. She could hear it all, separate and clear, the way a musician with perfect pitch can hear each individual instrument in a full orchestra. She moved to the side of the trail, found 2 large boulders that blocked the worst of the wind, and pressed herself between them. She pulled the emergency foil blanket from her day pack, wrapped it around her shoulders, and she listened. This was her skill. Not running. Not climbing. Not keeping up. This. She listened to the mountain. She heard the storm in layers, the high shriek of wind at the ridge peak above her, the lower moan of it through the tree line to the east, the near silence of it in the gully to her left where the topography broke its strength. She built a map in her mind from sound alone, a map of where the air was moving, where it was still, where the terrain rose and where it fell. And then, 42 minutes after the others had left her, she heard something else. It was subtle. Most people would have missed it entirely under the noise of the storm. But Mara's ears caught it the way a hand catches a coin dropped in a dark room, instinctively, without having to think about reaching. A snap. Clean and sharp, like a thick rope pulled past its limit. Then a long, low resonance, a sound with weight behind it, a sound that came up through the rock rather than down through the air. Then silence. Then another snap, and this time a deeper groan beneath it, and she knew exactly what it was because she had heard it once in a documentary about avalanche research, and sounds, for Mara, never faded. They lived in her memory with the same clarity as the day she first heard them. A cornice was fracturing. A massive shelf of compacted snow and ice that had built up along the eastern ridge face over the winter, the kind of formation that looked solid and was anything but, was beginning to separate from the rock beneath it. The eastern face. The trail the others had taken. Mara did not think about what they had done to her. She did not think about Travis walking away, or the silence of the others, or Derek's face as he turned and left. She thought about physics. She thought about timing. She thought about how fast a cornice the size of a house falls, and how fast 6 people walk in a storm, and whether the numbers still added up to something that could be changed. She thought for 7 seconds. She counted those too. Then she put the whistle to her lips and blew the SOS pattern, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, as hard as she could, aimed into the storm in the direction she had last heard their footsteps. Derek heard it first. He was not sure, at first, that he had heard anything at all. The wind was loud enough that his own thoughts felt muffled. But something made him slow, not stop, just slow, and tilt his head slightly, the instinctive movement of a person whose ear has caught something the brain hasn't processed yet. Then it came again. 3 short blasts, 3 long, 3 short. Clear and unmistakable. He grabbed Travis by the arm. Travis pulled away. "What are you?" "That's Mara. That's the whistle I gave her. That's SOS. She probably just fell again. That's SOS, Travis." There was a moment, a fraction of a second, where Travis almost won. Were the cold and the fear and the trail ahead almost one? Chloe ended it. She stepped past both of them and started walking back up the trail, head down, pack bouncing, and that was that. They turned around. All of them. And they walked back into the storm toward the girl they had left behind. They were 63 meters below the fracture line when the cornice released. The sound it made was not the sound Mara had heard, the warning sound, the crack and groan of something beginning to break. This was the sound of something that had already broken. A concussion of air, as if the mountain had exhaled everything at once. Then a roar, not loud the way thunder is loud, but deep, the kind of sound you feel in your chest and your teeth before your ears understand what they're hearing. The snow came down the eastern face in a rolling, churning wall. It was not slow. It was not dramatic in the way disaster movies make things dramatic, with time to look and understand and react. It was simply, instantly, overwhelmingly present, and then it was over, and the trail they had been walking was buried under 2 meters of white debris, and the 6 of them were standing on the path above it, alive, breathing hard, not speaking. Luke was the first to make a sound. It was not a word. It was not anything in particular. Just breath, escaping in a long, shaking exhale. Simone sat down in the snow. Not dramatically, she simply sat, the way a person sits when their legs have finished their job and need a moment to remember why they agreed to do it in the first place. Derek looked at where the trail used to be. Then he looked back up the ridge, toward where Mara was. Then he started walking. She had moved while she waited. Her ankle had not allowed her to go far, but she had gone far enough, dragging herself along the ridge using her arms and her good leg, pulling toward a rocky overhang she had identified by the change in wind acoustics. It was a shallow shelter, not deep enough to be called a cave, but enough to break the direct force of the sleet and keep the worst of the cold from her face. She was sitting upright when Derek found her. The foil blanket around her shoulders, her injured leg straight out in front of her, her back against the rock. Her eyes were open. She was watching the storm with an expression that was not fear and not calm exactly, something between the two. The expression of a person who has accepted where they are and is simply waiting to find out what happens next. Derek crouched down in front of her. He looked at her ankle, swollen now, visibly wrong even under the boot, and then at her face. "How did you know?" he asked. His voice was steady, but only just. Mara looked at him for a moment. Just looked at him, with those quiet eyes that had always made people slightly uncomfortable, as if she were listening to something they could not hear. "I heard it," she said. He did not understand, not fully, not yet. He would understand later, in the hospital waiting room, when the search and rescue coordinator explained the cornice formation to them, and when Simone pulled up an article on her phone about hyperacute hearing and read parts of it out loud in a hushed voice. He would understand the full shape of it then, that the girl they had left behind had heard the mountain breaking apart while they were still walking toward it, had recognized the sound for what it was, and had chosen, deliberately, consciously chosen, to warn them. But on the mountain, in that moment, with the storm still moving and the light still falling and the temperature still dropping, he did not need to understand the full shape of it. He sat down next to her in the snow, close enough that their shoulders touched, and he stayed there. The others arrived one by one. Nobody said very much. There was not much to say. The rescue helicopter reached them 2 hours and 17 minutes later, guided in by Derek's emergency beacon and the improved weather window that opened briefly in the early evening like a gift. Mara's ankle was fractured in 2 places, the original injury had partially rebroken, and there was new damage from the fall on the trail. She spent 6 days in the hospital. She had surgery on the 3rd day. She did not lose the foot. She did not lose anything permanent. The group fractured in a different way and over a longer period of time. Travis sent a card. Penn and Luke visited once and were kind in the hollow way of people who feel guilty but cannot bring themselves to say so directly. Chloe called every few days for the first 2 weeks, and the calls grew shorter and less frequent until they stopped, the way most things stop, not with a decision, just with distance. Simone came back 3 times. On her 3rd visit, sitting in the chair beside Mara's hospital bed with a cup of bad coffee growing cold in her hands, she started to cry. Not dramatically. Quietly, the way a person cries when they have been holding something and suddenly find they no longer have the strength to hold it. Mara let her cry. She did not reach over and say it was fine, because it was not entirely fine and they both knew it. She did not say she understood, because understanding and forgiving are not the same thing, and she was still working out the distance between them. She just let Simone cry, and after a while the crying slowed, and Simone wiped her face, and Mara said, "People make strange choices when they are scared. I know that now better than I did before." It was not forgiveness. It was not absolution. But it was honest, and it left a door open, and sometimes that is the most generous thing a person can offer. Derek came every day. He brought books she had not asked for and coffee she had not requested, and sat in the chair and sometimes talked and sometimes did not. On the last day before she was discharged, he asked her the question he had been turning over since the mountain. "Why did you warn us? After what we did?" Mara considered the question the way she considered everything, seriously, without rushing it, without filling the silence with words just to keep the silence away. "I've had this hearing my whole life," she said finally. "My whole life it has felt like a punishment. Too much of everything. Too loud, all the time, everywhere I went. I spent years wishing I could just hear normally. Just, normally. Like everyone else." She paused. That day on the mountain was the first time it didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like the reason. Like maybe the whole point of hearing too much your whole life was so that you could hear the right thing at the right moment. She looked at the window. The sky outside the hospital was an ordinary gray, unremarkable, the kind of sky that promises nothing and threatens nothing and simply is. "I wasn't going to waste that," she said. 18 months later, Mara stood at the top of a trail in the same mountain range. A different trail, easier, lower, without the exposure of the ridgeline. It was spring. The snow was completely gone, and the valley below her was so green it almost looked unreal, the way intensely living things sometimes do. She had come alone. By choice, this time. That was the difference that mattered most. She stood still for a long moment and she listened. Wind moving through new leaves, a lighter sound than winter wind, almost playful. Water running fast over stones somewhere far below in the valley. A hawk riding a thermal above the tree line, its wings making no sound at all, but its shadow passing over the ground with a faint whisper of displaced air. A woodpecker somewhere on the far ridge, 3 or 4 kilometers away, steady and rhythmic as a small heartbeat. The world was loud. The world was always, irreversibly, overwhelmingly loud for Mara Voss. She stood at the center of all that sound and she did not wish for any of it to be different.